Hey, welcome to the next edition of the College Football Junkies. My name is Mark. My co-host Montana is right to my left. Man, great day, isn't it?
It's a great day, man. It's always a great day or just a great week when there's college football, and this was no exception. We had games on Tuesday, bro. There were games this whole week.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And hey, next week we start MACtion, so there's going to be some Tuesday MAC games. Um, so that'll be pretty cool as well. We're going to kick things off, go over a couple of the games that happened on Tuesday. The first one we're going to touch on is Louisiana Raging Cajuns going up against Texas State. Texas State's pretty solid team. They play most everybody tough, and then Louisiana 7-1-4 and 4-0. They stayed undefeated in conference, beating Texas State 23-17. Wooldridge, their quarterback, went 18 of 28, 252 yards for one touchdown, while their running back Washington had 10 carries, 94 yards, one touchdown. And their top receiver is Legendre, 3 receptions for 76 yards, which is a pretty good ratio. Pretty solid team. What are your thoughts on this matchup here?
I mean, it was a pretty good matchup. I think, like you said, there were definitely some mismatches in certain areas, but I think there was definitely some exciting football played, and it's good to see some of those. I don't want to say lower tier teams, but some of those teams you might not always think of, have a little spotlight and have a pretty solid game. And so I thought it was some good football, and I definitely think we'll see some more good football for the rest of the season out of possibly, both of those teams, honestly.
Yeah. Louisiana should be up there for their conference championship at the end of the year. Should be fun to watch. They've been a fun team to watch all year. Moving on, kind of a scoregami. Also on Tuesday, we got the Sam Houston Bearcats going up against Louisiana Tech Bulldogs. 9-3. You would see that score and you'll honestly think that you're watching like a baseball game or something. Very weird. What are your takes on this defensive matchup that everybody witnessed on Tuesday?
I mean, very rarely do you see a matchup that ends 9-3. We've seen it a couple of times. Obviously, it happens, but it is either the sign of some great defensive football or a lot of mistakes, or both. Obviously, it was kept close the whole game. Defensive matchup and the final score, like you said, you would have thought you might have been catching the World Series that night or something, because that score is just, you don't see that in football that often. So because you don't see it very often, and also because neither of those teams were a team of mine, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. But if one of those teams was a team of mine and I was a fan, I would be a little bit, I don't know. That's just not a game you want to watch. Wasn't there a Super Bowl that was like 9-3 with the Rams Patriots?
Not 9. It was like 13-11 or something like that. It was some ridiculously low scoring. It is honestly the most boring Super Bowl of all time, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. It was not a fun one.
Yeah, well, and catching a little bit of the Sam Houston game on Tuesday. 13-3.
Which, I guess the Patriots obviously had a little more offensive success, but that reminded me that just a boring kind of a game you can fall asleep during. But it's okay. Again, they happen. Defensive showdown.
Well, and they do happen, but the big question is like, how much of it is attributed to how terrible their offenses are, and how good is their defense? And Sam Houston's a solid team. They're 7-2, 4-1, and they struggled mightily against Louisiana Tech. They're 3-5, 2-3 in conference. So I don't know. Sam Houston might have not had the best week of preparation, but they still came out with a win. So that's all that matters there. Moving on to our Friday night slate, we've got San Diego State and Boise State. Boise State enters this game as a 23.5-point favorite over the Aztecs. What are your thoughts? Do you think Ashton Gianti keeps going on his record pace at running back, Or do you think San Diego State could potentially pull off the upset tonight?
Well, first of all, I definitely think that Boise State is on a run. They're on a tear this season. It's no
Mm-hmm.
secret that this team is currently, I believe, what are they? Are they 7-1? Um,
Let me look.
I believe
They're 6-1. 6-1.
6-1. So 6-1. Obviously, they have had a really insane season, and a good amount of that can be attributed to that all-star slash future Heisman winning running back as long as he stays healthy. Boise State's going to have no issue against San Diego State. San Diego State, I believe, are a 3-win program. Maybe they're a 4-win program. It doesn't matter. Boise State, 6-1, number 15 in the nation. They look like they could honestly be one of those sleeper playoff teams that actually might be able to go on a run. Yes, they're not in the toughest conference in college football, but they've proven that they are
Yeah.
a force to be reckoned with. And I think they're going to obviously the rest of their schedule regular season they could sleepwalk some of those games and have a pretty high scoring game. This game I think will be one of those. I think Boise State scores 35 to 42 points, and I don't see San Diego State scoring more than 3 to 10. So I think the final score is going to be 42-7. That's my prediction. I think Boise State steamrolls San Diego State and continues a playoff berth. And I think they will finish with only one loss. I really, really, truly do. I think they've picked up their only loss for the season, and it definitely was not against San Diego State. So give me Boise State winning by like 30 plus.
I like that pick. I do think Boise State keeps it going. I do think 23.5 could be a lot of points, though. But I could definitely see, a 17 to 20 point win for Boise State. I think San Diego State will put up a few points. Give me Boise State 42, San Diego State 20. I think San Diego State will find something that they can take advantage of in that Boise State defense. And I do think they put up a few scores. My big question is, do you think Ashton Gianti, even with Travis Hunter's performance last week, do you think Gianti is the Heisman favorite still, or do you think Travis Hunter surpassed him after his performance last week?
I would say Travis Hunter is now number 2 on my list above Cam Ward, but I definitely think Gianti is still first. I definitely think, not that we're doing a top for this, but if I had a top 3, it would go Ward, and then it would go Hunter, and then it would go Gianti. But here's what I'll say, if Travis Hunter can keep up the level of play he had last game consistently for the rest of the season, because he is a two-way player and he is such a special player, I do think he will win Heisman. But if Gianti stays healthy and keeps on his tear and Travis Hunter doesn't continue to stack up those games in a row, I think Gianti wins it. But as of now, I'm still team Gianti. But shout out to Travis Hunter because he had an absolute coming back from, people thought he might not be playing with injury, and he came back and had one of his best games he's had. So shout out to Travis Hunter. But I do still have Gianti right now. What about you, bro?
I've also got Gianti, but Travis Hunter is kind of sneaking up right now. If he continues to put up performances like last week, one, he's going to go down as one of the best two-way players to ever play college football. And two, he's probably going to run away with the Heisman, especially if Colorado keeps rolling the way they have been. It seems like ever since they played Nebraska, it humbled Colorado a little bit. Getting kicked in the mouth in Memorial Stadium that Saturday night. So you see them playing a little bit, of a different, style of football, different mentality. They're not as noisy on social media. Pats fan says Travis Hunter is the best college football player of all time. I don't know about that one.
He's 30?
Yeah.
He's top 30, possibly.
Yeah, he's a damn good player. He's going to be a top 5 draft pick, easily.
Do you think both go in the top 5?
Him and Shedeur go in the top 5. I think so. I think Shedeur will very possibly be the top quarterback taken in the draft.
I think it's possible too, for sure. What year is Ward a junior or a senior?
I think Ward is a senior.
So you think Shedeur gets picked above Ward?
Oh, I think Shedeur gets picked over Ward for sure.
I think so too. I think it'll be draft. That'll be super interesting as we get closer to the end of college football season. Kind of looking at
we start breaking down prospects.
That's going to be exciting. I'm excited for that, and definitely Cam Ward and Shedeur will both be top 10 without a doubt. But I'm with you. I can see Shedeur. That'd be crazy. Travis Hunter and Shedeur going in that top 5 for Colorado. I'm not a big Colorado fan, but that would be kind of cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much a lock, especially if they continue to perform at the level that they have been. I mean, they're right in the conversation of the Big 12 championship as we speak. So the big question is, will they keep it up?
Mm-hmm.
Because we've seen two different Colorado teams. We've seen one that'll absolutely smash somebody, and then we've seen the Colorado team that played Nebraska and got absolutely smacked. They were completely asleep. They didn't show up. So again, if they continue to perform at the level that they have been, the last, say, 3-4 weeks, I would easily take it to the bank and say both Travis Hunter and Shedeur are going in the, first 5 picked in the draft. Should be interesting, and obviously we'll break down everything as far as what we think, how the draft is gonna, go when the season's over, and we can maybe get a better idea what the feel is around, the NFL. Who do we think these NFL teams are going to go after? Obviously, we'll have a more in-depth breakdown as we get further along. Our next game we're going to touch on here, 6 p.m. tonight. It is the 2-5 Georgia State Panthers and the 5-3 UConn Huskies. UConn could become bowl eligible if they can take care of business against Georgia State. Georgia State is an 8.5-point underdog, which does say a lot. Georgia State is a relatively solid team. Their record doesn't exactly show it. Sports Maniac, UConn doesn't get a bowl game this season. Come on now. They could. They're independent. They're 5-3. What are your thoughts on UConn going up against Georgia State? Do you think they get that 6th win, or do you think Georgia State pulls off the upset and UConn has to wait another week?
Not only do I think UConn gets the 6th win tonight, I think they get the 7th and maybe the 8th win this season. Looking at the remainder of their year, they play UAB next week following this game, and then they play Syracuse. Syracuse will be a little bit of a tougher matchup, and then they finish their season with UMass. I see them beating UMass. I see them beating UAB, and so I really think this team finishes with 8 wins. I really do. I think, obviously, you said it. You said it the best. Obviously, they're in a conference that is not one of the harder ones, one of the more high caliber ones. And also, they're a pretty solid squad. Their record isn't beautiful. It isn't the best, but they're a pretty solid football team. And I think they take Georgia State to the cleaners tonight. I think they run them out, get that bowl win, and then I think they continue that momentum against UAB. I really do. So I think it'll be like a 28-10 type of win. Obviously, that's not a huge blowout to where we're scoring 30 plus points, but I think that they get 21 to 28 points, and I don't see Georgia State scoring over 10, honestly.
Yeah, I've got UConn getting that win to become bowl eligible as well. I'm going to say 24-13 UConn. I do think they cover the 8.5. Georgia State might hang in there for a little bit tonight. But I do think UConn will find a way to maybe pull away a little bit as we get later in the game. That game kicks off at 6 p.m. on the CBS Sports Network. So that should be interesting to check out. Our next game is at 6:30 p.m. on ESPN2. We've got the South Florida Bulls going to Florida Atlantic. Both teams have kind of struggled as of late. South Florida, I expected to be a little bit better. I thought they were going to compete for the conference this year. Turns out They're not very good at all. And then Florida Atlantic is in the same boat. South Florida enters this game at 3-4, 1-2. Florida Atlantic enters 2-5, 0-3, and this is really a must-win for both of these teams going in if they want any semblance of bowl eligibility at the end of the year. What are your takes on South Florida and Florida Atlantic?
I mean, like you said, this is a must-win. Both teams have underperformed. I really think, and I'm with you. South Florida is a team. Obviously, you don't think of them as one of the top tier football teams, but you do have expectations even for those lower tier teams, and they have definitely not met those expectations this season. But what I will say is, I mean, they've got a pretty decent schedule ahead. I think they pick up I believe it'd be their fourth win against Florida Atlantic. Now, Navy, looking at the rest of their schedule, Navy is not going to be a game that I think they win. I do think they drop to Navy. Navy's a team that's pretty angry right now because they obviously lost their ranked position. So I think they'll go on a pretty big tear for the rest of the season and win out most of their games. So I think they'll lose to Navy. But other than that, they play Charlotte, they play Tulsa, and they play Rice. So I do think that South Florida, while they have had a pretty underwhelming season, will finish with a bowl game. I do think they will sneak in and get a bowl game, but they're going to have to play. This is a must win. If they don't win today, they're not done. They have games left, and could they still possibly get one? Yes, but they've got to win today if they want to get a bowl game. And then Florida Atlantic on the other side, they have been a really, again, lower tier, lower conference team, but I feel like they have honestly underperformed as well. I think these are two teams that have underperformed that are looking for a turnaround in their season. I'm going to give it to South Florida. I think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be won by a score. I honestly do. I think we're going to look at not a super high scoring matchup. Give me 28-21. South Florida pulls it off, finishes and moves up to 4 wins and kind of sees what they can do going forward for the rest of their season.
I like that pick. I think Florida Atlantic is dealing with way too many injuries right now. I don't think they're going to have enough firepower. Give me South Florida as well. I think it's going to be a little bit of a bigger spread between the two teams. It is a rivalry game, but I do think South Florida pulls it out 24-13. I don't think Florida Atlantic's got too much to really say or do at this point in the year. I think their season's pretty much done. Meanwhile, if South Florida does win, they only got to get 2 more wins. And looking at their schedule, they very well could get 2 more wins at the end of the year. Navy is going to be pissed off next week, so that's going to be tough. But I do think they could get wins against Charlotte, maybe Tulsa and Rice. So, oh my God, Pats fan, you are delusional.
Pats fan, everybody's better than the Huskers is what I'm kind of gathering. That's what it sounds like to me.
I'll definitely take 5-3 over 3-4 in a lower tier conference for sure. But just going on with their schedule, I do think South Florida finds their way into a bowl game this year. It'll probably be as a 6-6 team. But hey, that's a hell of a lot better than they started the season. So if they can do that, finish this year with a little bit more momentum, maybe you could talk about them having a pretty solid year in 2025. We will see. Moving on to our Saturday morning slate. We got it is the biggest game of the day. The number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes going up against the number 3 Penn State Nittany Lions in State College. What are your takes on this one? Do you think Penn State stays undefeated, or do you think Ohio State hands Penn State their one loss, even though we know Nebraska did exploit a few things on that Ohio State side that Penn State could really take advantage of?
Well, because you made a great final statement with how Nebraska, that game against the Huskers exposed several several factors and several things that teams could take advantage of, and Penn State is no exception. I think they will take advantage of it, and I think Penn State will win when the final whistle is blown, but I think it's going to be an absolute fight the whole game. This is not going to be a game where we're looking at one quarter, two quarters where these teams are close and then there's a big separation. I really see Penn State winning by a touchdown. Is that going to be a final drive in the last 5 minutes? I'm not entirely sure, but I do think that they will win within the last 10 minutes of the football game. And I do think that Penn State wins 35-28 because, like you said, Ohio State absolutely had several key factors that were exposed against the Huskers, and I just don't believe that Penn State has been exposed like that yet. I feel like Penn State is a more well-rounded team than Ohio State. Looking beyond the Husker loss, or excuse me, not Husker loss, but the Husker almost loss, I do think that Penn State is a more well-rounded, complete squad. So give me a Penn State winning 35-28 in a shot-for-shot, punch-for-punch game that goes until the final quarter.
Yeah. And I want to touch on that Nebraska-Ohio State game, too, while we're on this game. Last week, Ohio State has one of the top running back tandems in college football with Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Ohio State ran the ball 26 times, and they only gained like 60 yards on the ground on 26 carries, which is just over 3 yards average. Not very good. Nebraska did a great job at stopping the run, making Ohio State one-dimensional, and that's ultimately what kept Nebraska in the game. Is Nebraska's defense came out and they said the Indiana game was a fluke. Well, you're going up against a higher-powered offense in Ohio State with the athletes that they have. That's a $20 million roster. And Nebraska held within 4 points. That you could argue that they probably should have won that game. But at the end of the day, they didn't. But they had a better showing against Ohio State than Indiana.
By far.
And it was kind of unexpected. I did not expect that. I kind of wish I would have driven across the river to Iowa and placed a bet on Nebraska to cover, because that would have pocketed me some pretty change. But yeah, Nebraska exploited a lot. They were in Will Howard's face a lot on Saturday, and they were getting a lot of pressures. They also held Ohio State to 1 of 10 on third down. Ohio State only converted 1 third down all game long. And that includes when Nebraska kind of started off disastrous, had that shanked punt, and put Ohio State on Nebraska's side of the field, and Nebraska forced a 4-and-out. And they got a defensive stand, on, I think, 4th and 1. So, again, I think Penn State does pull this one off at home on Big Noon. Give me Penn State winning 31-24. I do think it's going to be a little bit back and forth. I do think Penn State gets a drive toward the end of the game that puts them ahead, and I don't think Ohio State will have enough time to come back and score.
They're not a team that could have like a miracle play where they do that. There are those teams that could come right back in your face and score, but I don't think that's Ohio State. So
Ohio State has 2 of the better receivers in the country. I mean, you have Jeremiah Smith, who tore the top off of Nebraska's defense last week for that, I think, 60-yard touchdown. I mean, he could blow the top off. He has track speed. But if Penn State comes out the right game plan, they're not going to give up a whole lot of big plays to Ohio State. So, and I don't know if they fully trust Will Howard either. Just based on some of the play calls, they had against Nebraska last week. Nebraska basically took them out of their game plan, which was kind of awesome to see, all told. But yeah, this is going to be probably the best game of the weekend by far. as far as, ranked matchups go. Moving on to another interesting 11 a.m. kick. We've got the 6-2 Duke Blue Devils against number 5 Miami. I don't know, man. Could be a little upset alert here. What are your thoughts?
When I was looking at this game, looking at this matchup, I was thinking upset alert. But I do really think Miami will pull it off. I think Miami will play a pretty hard-fought game. I think it'll be really close in the first half, to the point where I think Miami will even get off to a slow start. I think we could see Duke score in the first and be the first team to score and kind of not expose the Miami defense, but kind of put on display what has been one of the issues for this Miami team. But I see Miami pulling it off. I see Miami winning by 2 scores when it's all said and done. And I don't think we're going to see Duke do much past the first half. I think we'll see Duke be pretty active in the first half. I think we'll see Duke score 14-2, all of their 21 points. I see them scoring in the first half. I think there's a chance they don't score in the second half. I think there's a chance that Miami comes out and just shuts them out. But I do see Duke scoring upwards of 21 points because that Miami defense has some holes and they have been exposed. But give me Miami winning by 2 scores. Give me Miami winning 21-35, and second half, there's going to be no question who's winning that game. I think, again, first half, it'll be close. We'll see Miami show off some of their up and down, some of their inconsistencies, but I do think Cam Ward in that offense and that defense even may show up and have a good second half. So give me Miami by 2 scores, but I do think it'll be a semi-close game, at least for most of it.
Good pick. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff. It could be pretty sleepy.
That's true.
Give me Duke with the upset.
Ooh,
I think Duke pulls it off. I think Duke's defense is a little bit better. I think they could fluster Cam Ward a little bit, even with the explosive playmakers that Miami has. And I do think Duke's offense is pretty solid as well. There's a lot that they could take advantage of in that Miami defense. I do think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring. Give me Duke 35, Miami 31.
Ooh.
I think it's going to be a little higher scoring.
Yeah, man, I'd love that. I hope that's the outcome because I would love to see a shot-for-shot game. And honestly, Duke, while they don't have the same, top 10 status as Miami, Duke is a pretty consistent ball team this season, and I definitely can see them pulling it off. I just think Miami is on that tear. Now, I don't think they're on like a championship season tear where they go all the way to the championship, but I do think we'll see them possibly keep their top 10 status to finish the season out. Obviously, that's not the easiest call to make, and there's plenty of football left. But I definitely think there's a chance they could after beating Duke. I mean, you're looking at Georgia Tech next week. That should be a win. Now, I say should be because Georgia Tech obviously has been known to upset teams. And then you have Wake Forest. Yeah, they're sneaky. They are. Georgia Tech is a super sneaky team. Then you've got Wake Forest. I do see them being able to handle business against Wake Forest. But then you've got Syracuse, and that's a team that you absolutely cannot sleepwalk against. And they will be a team that will be ready to rain on Miami's parade. So while I do think Miami could have a really good rest of their season, I definitely don't see them winning out the rest of their year. I think they will. Something is going to give because of these inconsistencies that we've seen throughout the entire season. I don't think their give is going to be playoffs. I think their give is going to be regular season. And I think it could be against that Georgia Tech team. I think that will be the upset for me, will be them losing to Georgia Tech, honestly. I think an upset is brewing, but I don't think it's quite yet. But maybe it's the peak.
I just think, this being an 11 a.m. kick, Miami could be sleepwalking into this one. Absolutely. They could be just looking at the name on the jersey, be like, hey, we should steamroll these guys. This Duke team is solid. I mean, I've watched them most of the year, and, I mean, they played a really good SMU team to 1 point in overtime last week. They beat Florida State. They lost by 10 to Georgia Tech, but then they beat North Carolina. They whooped on Middle Tennessee State. Like, they're a solid ball team this year. Um, and I do think they got, a slightly better defense to maybe take advantage and maybe fluster Cam Ward a little bit. I just, all told, I just think an 11 a.m. kick for this game it's a very sleepy time to have a game like this. It's kind of, going on the Penn State Ohio State game. Penn State Ohio State game, 3 versus 4, you would expect to see that at 7 o'clock at night, under the lights. And I saw that comment, Miami wins 52-0. They
They're
haven't
not.
had a shutout all year, and that's not going to happen now.
It's not happening at this point in the season. The rest, like they would have had that at one of their first few games of the year if they were having that.
They should have had a shutout against Florida State last week, but that didn't happen. They should have had one against USF. That didn't happen. You could argue probably they should have been pretty close against Cal.
Mm-hmm.
That was not very close. That was a 1 point. They were so close to losing that game against Cal.
They were.
And then they were pretty close to losing to Virginia Tech, too. So, again, I think this is going to be the Miami's first real shot at getting upset this year. And what better time than at 11 a.m. to get people's, college football Saturdays up and going. So that'll be interesting. Hope one of us is going to be right for sure. One of us has got Miami. One of us has got Duke. So let's go.
Always, bro. We just have to pick different teams each time. Without any thought, we'll do it on TV.
One of us is guaranteed to be right. Yeah,
exactly. That's the way to do it, man. Guarantee some W's around here. But
yeah,
no, I think it'll be a good game. No matter who wins, I definitely think we're looking at a game that'll be below a 10-point win for either team.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to another interesting kick at 11 a.m. We've got the number 19 Ole Miss Rebels going to Arkansas. Arkansas's a pretty sneaky team in the SEC. They've got athletes. They've got a quarterback that can run it all over the field. And then there's Ole Miss. They've got a lot of firepower as well. What are your thoughts on this 11 a.m. kickoff in Arkansas?
I think this is going to be a super, super exciting matchup. Obviously, Ole Miss is number 19 right now. Ole Miss has had some pretty decent showings this season, but give me Arkansas. Give me Arkansas because I truly believe that Arkansas is a team that is slept on. Now, obviously, their record of 5-3 isn't stellar. It isn't the best in the conference. But I really think that Arkansas is sneakily one of the better teams in that conference that people aren't talking about. And I think that we're going to see that in this game against Ole Miss. Now, Ole Miss is no slouch. Ole Miss is not a team that has any huge holes, in my opinion, that are going to be exposed. But I just think Arkansas, I mean, you said it best. They can run you out of the stadium with that quarterback and with that offense. And I think they're going to show up, and it's at home. I mean, that's huge. That's another big thing. No matter what team you are, I don't care if you're Nebraska or if you're South Dakota State. If you're at home, you have a far better chance of winning because you know your fans are going to show up. So there's a mix of a few different factors going on, but I've got Arkansas winning. I do think it'll be a semi-close game. I think we'll see it go pretty. I don't want to say down to the wire because I do think Arkansas is going to find about a 10-point separation in that second half. Or in that last quarter, but I do think it is going to be a really close game up until then. I think Ole Miss will definitely be able. I think Ole Miss can put up 21. I think it'll be a 21 point. I think it'll be 21-31. That's my final. I think it'll be 21-31. Give me Arkansas.
I like that pick. I'm also going to go with Arkansas on this one. I've liked what they have done outside of the LSU game this year. They've looked pretty solid. I mean, this is a team that beat Tennessee in that low-scoring barn burner that we all witnessed on the 5th of October. And then this was a team that was also within 5 points of beating Texas A&M, who right now is the best team in the conference. And then they beat Auburn at Auburn. it is a tough Arkansas team. The biggest key for Arkansas though is keeping the turnover bug away. Not turning the ball over a lot. Their quarterback hasn't turned over the ball a ton. He's only thrown 7 interceptions. But you look at the other side, Jackson Dart for Ole Miss only has 3. He has a 15-3 touchdown interception ratio. So keeping the turnovers down is a key for Arkansas if they really want to pull off this upset. Does Arkansas gain a top 25 rank after this week if they win? Absolutely. I do think they are a top 25 team if they do pull it off against Ole Miss. Without question, just looking at how they have performed outside of the LSU game, all their games have been really close, and that would put them at 6-3, 4-2 in conference. Put them kind of in that top half in the conference in the SEC. And then if Ole Miss loses, I could see them dropping completely out of the top 25. They'll be in the receiving votes category for sure. But I've got Arkansas winning this one 31-24. I think it's going to be within a touchdown. If we were to do bets of the week or whatever, like our top bets, I would probably put this game in there, and I would definitely put Arkansas plus the 7.5. I do think Arkansas at least covers this game.
Yeah, I definitely think I can see that for sure. The thing about Arkansas is I think they're a more polished team than Ole Miss. Again, Ole Miss has had some really, really good matchups this season, but for me, Arkansas just top to bottom looks like a more well-polished, well-off team. So I think, but again, it's not going to be a blowout. It's not going to be a game. I mean, anything could happen. It's college football. We've seen plenty of surprising games happen, but I really don't think we're looking at a blowout here. I think we're looking at a shot for shot, and I think it absolutely will finish between a 7 to 10 point victory. Arkansas definitely, I think, will be that team that comes out. And to answer Sports Maniacs, I'm with you, Mark. I definitely think they're ranked. And I think not only are they ranked, I think they have a really good chance at having a really nice, not top 12, not playoff berth.
It'll be top 20.
Top 20. Maybe even they break into that top 16 and they're like closer to like, maybe they're 15, 16, 17 when it's all said and done if they can have a nice string of wins for the rest of the season. So shout out to Arkansas. I definitely think they'll get that W tomorrow.
Yeah, I think so too. Should be interesting to watch. Should be a great game to watch.
Absolutely.
Moving on, this game is on CBS and Paramount Plus. We've got Air Force going up against the number 21 Army Black Knights. Army has come out like their hair is on fire, and they're absolutely killing everybody that they play. And then there's Air Force. Air Force is not having a good year this year. They are 1-6. They had a good year last year, and everybody thought it was like, oh, maybe they could win 10, 11 games. Nope. They're probably going to struggle to win 2 or 3 at this rate. But this is a battle of the service academies. What are your thoughts on this one? Do you think Air Force can keep this one close because the spread right now is 22? Do you think Air Force could hold that spread to under 22 and maybe give Army a game a little bit?
So Army is a team. Army, we talked Navy. Obviously Navy dropped that game to, I believe it was Notre Dame. But Navy and Army are those teams this season. They are obviously service academies have not always been the greatest football teams. They've not always had the best seasons, but we are looking at 2 teams that are having an incredible season. Who is going to have a better one overall? It's definitely looking like Army. And I think Army, first of all, steamrolls Air Force and wins 42-14. And I wouldn't be shocked if Air Force scores those 14, maybe 1 touchdown in the first, 1 touchdown in the second, split them like that. I don't think they're going to score back-to-back. I don't think they're going to have a lot of success on drives. I think we're going to see a lot of 3 and outs. I think we're going to see their punter on the field a lot. And I think we're going to see Army just have without a doubt victory, 42. I think it's going to be a 42-14 win. And then I think Army continues that. And we have a segment going over undefeated teams later, but I really think Army has a chance at finishing their season undefeated. I really, 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 really do, because after this, now I do believe, isn't their last matchup against Navy? Is that their last game, regular game of the season?
Yeah, it's in December.
Navy's going to want to ruin Army. If Army is still undefeated, since Navy was the team, I mean, there's that competition between service teams. And I mean, Navy definitely wanted to finish undefeated and have that title. So it'll be a battle, and that's the one game looking at Army's schedule that I can see Army possibly dropping. But if Army wins, like I do think they win today, I think there is no doubt in my mind that they could have an undefeated campaign for the rest of the season. So shout out to Army. I think they steamroll Air Force. I think it's going to be above 20-point win.
So the spread is 22. The over-under is 41.5. I do think Army wins. I think Air Force comes out and plays their best football game of the year, though, going up against Army. I do think they're gonna be able to hold Army at bay a little bit. Give me Army 24, Air Force 14.
Nice. Okay, so a little 10-point.
So I think it's gonna pull a slight under. And I think Air Force covers.
Okay. Man, that would be a game. So you think Air Force has what it takes to keep up with Army?
It's service academies, man. They all play very tough against one another. I mean, you look at the Air Force Navy game, that wasn't much of a game. Navy basically ran all over them. But I do think Air Force is going to come ready. They've been smacked in the mouth a lot this season. Army is better than Nebraska. Well, they're 7-0, dude. Okay, chill out.
I think he's just picking every team we talk about, or at least one of them. He's picking and choosing a few of them.
I mean, who's next? Is it going to be Purdue's better than Nebraska? Oh, wait, Nebraska beat them, so it's all good. But I mean, you look at games between service academies, and they're all usually, for the most part, pretty well played, tough matchups, because the service academies want to have that one leg over the other. And they want to kick each other's ass. That's the ultimate thing. So I do think, the fact that Air Force has been smacked in the mouth a lot this year, I do think they're going to come out hungry and maybe come out with a little bit of a statement against number 21 Army. I think it's going to be an ugly slog for a large part of it, but I do think Army makes a couple of more plays in the fourth quarter to maybe pull away for a 10-point win.
Man, yeah.
Yeah, I can really see that happening.
That'd be a dogfight. And I mean, you did say service academies, any rivalry in college football, I kind of feel like it's different than any other sport rivalry. I feel like any rivalry game, literally almost anything could happen most of the time, and a service rivalry game is absolutely no exception, if not probably the highest case of that rivalry and that history. And so that being on display can definitely make a team that's, I mean, what they've won, is it 2 games, 1 game? They can definitely make a team that's won under 4 games electric and wake up and have a big victory. I just think Army is going to go on a tear, and they're going to leave no doubt in anyone's mind early, but I could definitely be wrong, and I can definitely see Air Force hanging on and sticking around and making it a game. So either way, it'll be a matchup.
Yeah, well, and it's easy to say that Army is just going to run away with this one. Just looking at their schedule and seeing what they have done throughout their schedule, like there haven't been many close games, so they haven't really been punched in the mouth too much. I do think, though, Air Force is going to come ready, and at least I hope they do, because, well, my dad served in the Air Force, so I want them to play good football. Obviously, it's not this season, but maybe they could pull off a couple of wins to end the year. We'll see. But I do think they come out hungry. I do think they come out and say we're not going to get pushed around too much. At least that's what I hope. And hopefully it is more of a game than some of Army's other games, which were probably over by about the second quarter.
Most of them.
We'll
honestly,
see.
They've had a lot of games where they have had no issue winning by the end of the second.
Oh my gosh. It's the other teams never stood a chance.
No.
Army's probably going to go on and win the American Conference at this rate, probably. But yeah, that'll be an interesting one to watch at 11 a.m. as well. Again, that one's on CBS and Paramount Plus. Moving on to another 11 a.m. kickoff. This one's kind of interesting. We've got the Minnesota Golden Gophers going up against the number 24 Illinois Fighting Illini. Who does CU play this weekend? Hold on. I don't even know if they play. I think they're in a bye week.
Yeah, I think. Let me look.
Yep,
their next game is against Texas Tech. Ooh, that'll be a good one, man. That'll
be a good one
next Saturday. So that'll be
Texas Tech can score.
Yeah, dude, that'll be a game.
Yeah. But touching on this game, it's on FS1 at 11 a.m. as well. It's the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who have been playing some pretty good football as of late, going up against number 24 Illinois, who got absolutely clobbered against Oregon last week. What are your feelings on this game? Do you think Illinois getting clobbered the way they did last week bodes well for Minnesota, or do you think Illinois will find a way to get right this game?
Could Illinois get right this game? Absolutely. Do I think Minnesota steamrolls Illinois and wins by 3, 4, even 2 scores? Definitely not. I think Minnesota wins by a field goal. Give me 24-21. Minnesota wins a decently highly defensive matchup, a decently mid-scoring game that doesn't break, that little. I don't think it breaks 24 points. I think 24 points is where I see this game capping off at. I think we're going to see a classic defensive back and forth, shot for shot, drive for drive Big Ten game. And I do think it'll end in Minnesota's favor and they'll win by that field goal. But obviously, Illinois has had a really, really good season and they could continue that campaign. But I just really think Minnesota will be a team that'll bump them out and knock them out of their top 25 spot.
That's a decent pick. But I'm going to go with Illinois. I do think it's going to be a really close game, though. Just seeing how both teams have played largely throughout the season. It's going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game, I think, though. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot on the offensive side of the ball for both teams. Give me Illinois 17, Minnesota 14. I do think Illinois finds a way, gets a late field goal, and I think they'll survive and pull it out and go to 7-2 on the year. Minnesota, though, they're playing better football. And man, they started off the season super slow. They weren't doing a whole lot. But man, they've come out on fire the last few weeks. They beat USC in a pretty close game. USC is not looking very good. They beat UCLA, again, not a very good team. And then they beat Maryland, which, again, is not a very good team. So they beat 3 underwhelming teams this year. So we'll see if Minnesota can potentially pull this one off. But I do think Illinois has the slight quarterback advantage with Luke Altmaier. Luke Altmaier's very solid QB, 15-3 TD to touch or TD to interception ratio. Yeah, should be an interesting game. And it will definitely keep Illinois technically in the conversation for the Big Ten championship if things, kind of go south for a couple of other teams. So we'll see. Moving on to another game in our 11 a.m. window. This is a battle to get bowl eligible. Thank you, Jay. We appreciate that. moving on. We've got the Virginia Tech Hokies going up against the Syracuse Orange. This is a battle to get bowl eligible. This is on the CW network at 11 a.m. What are your takes on this one? Do you think which team do you have getting bowl eligible first?
I think it'll be Syracuse. I really, really do. I think this will be another game that has potential to be an extremely close matchup. I think we're seeing a pretty even level of competition between these two squads going into this week, into this matchup. Obviously, Syracuse has had a couple of games that they've dropped. One being that pretty big loss to Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh is a pretty solid team. I mean, they're currently, I believe, number 18, so they're definitely no slouch of a team, but obviously Syracuse losing by that margin and the way they played the game, they did not look like that good of a squad, but they are a far better team than they looked in that game. I do want to say right now, Syracuse is a much better team than they looked in that Pittsburgh game. So I think Syracuse wins. I think it'll be a pretty close first half where we'll see a decently low scoring first half, but I do think the game will possibly open up a little bit in that second half, and I think Syracuse will end up winning by 2 scores and winning 35-21 when it's all said and done.
I like that pick. I like the pick a lot. I don't think Kyle McCord is going to have a game like last week where he throws 5 interceptions, 3 of them for pick sixes. I think he's going to come out ready.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be in a better headspace for this game, and this game's at home, which is going to be a big thing too. I do think Syracuse has a little bit more firepower than Virginia Tech. Give me Syracuse winning this one 35-21. I do think they find a way to pull away by 2 scores. But yeah, I think last week was kind of an anomaly, especially for McCord. McCord's put up solid numbers all year long outside of last week.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is his bounce back game. And I think that gets him right, and it keeps them in the conversation for the ACC. Which will be interesting. It's an interesting race so far. So we'll see if Syracuse can kind of keep pace with everybody in the conference. So yeah, we'll definitely keep tabs on that game. Moving on, kind of a weird kickoff time here. 11:45 a.m. We've got the Vanderbilt Commodores going up against Auburn. Vanderbilt, with a win, could become bowl eligible. What do you think, man? Do you think they pull it off against Auburn? Or do you think Auburn finds a way to make Vanderbilt wait another week?
I think Auburn finds a way to make them wait. I really do. And not only do I think they find a way to make them wait, there's a chance that Vandy doesn't even get that 6th win. Now, you've got South Carolina next weekend. Definitely could win against South Carolina. But then following that game, you've got number 16 LSU and number 7 Tennessee. Now, obviously, Vanderbilt has proven that they are no slouch when it comes to beating top 25 teams, and they've done that this season. But I think that their time in that spotlight, and with that, I'm going to call it luck because I really think it was luck, is gone. I think they absolutely are dropping the game to LSU, and they're absolutely dropping their game against Tennessee. So then that leaves 2 games to get that 6th win, and that will be this one and South Carolina. I think Vanderbilt loses this game today. Auburn is not a good team this year. They definitely are not the Auburn that we have seen in the past, but I think they have a really, 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 really big showing in the game tomorrow. And yes, it's a weird kickoff time. I don't like super weird kickoff time. But I think Auburn takes advantage of a couple different factors on game day and pulls out the win. But I do think it will be a super close game, and I think we could even be looking at a possible overtime game. We have not seen a lot of exciting overtime games this year, and I think this could possibly be one of those games. Give me a 1-score win for Auburn in what I would call an upset because of the football that Vanderbilt has played this season. Even though they're not a ranked team, even though they're not, in the running for anything, I do think that this would be considered an upset just because of what Vandy has been able to do and what Auburn has not been able to do. So give me Auburn winning by a score in a I think it's going to be a pretty high-scoring matchup that kind of runs up. I think it's going to be 42-35 Auburn.
Good pick. I've got Vanderbilt. I think they get bowl eligible. Just looking at stats, I think Vanderbilt has the quarterback advantage. And I mean, you look at some of their recent scores. I mean, they beat a pretty good Bama team. You know, at the time, Bama was ranked number 1. Upset Bama, and then they almost upset Texas. So they're right there against these teams. Give me Vanderbilt 31-21. I think Vanderbilt wins by 10 points, and it'll really set the seat of Auburn's coach, I believe, Hugh Freeze, on fire. I think Hugh Freeze's seat will definitely be on fire if they fall to 3-6, 1-5 in conference.
And as it should, because that's a team that has history and that should not be losing games like that. So I definitely think that would be a very understandable hot seat that should be getting hot. One thing I will say about Auburn is their record. They're the kind of team where their record doesn't show how good of a football team I think they really are, because we saw them pick up a loss to number 20, now number 25 Missouri, that 21-17 loss. Cover that up with a bounce back win over Kentucky. Obviously, Kentucky, not a good team, on a very similar level with Auburn, with underperforming certain areas. But Auburn came out and won by not just one score like they could have. They won 24-10, and it was a kind of a win that left little to be thought about, little to be questioned. So I think Auburn, despite their record, they're in the best place they could be in to take on Vandy, coming off of a win over Kentucky, and then even that loss to Missouri was a pretty close one. Now, before that, you've got a loss to Georgia, 31-13. Obviously, that was probably, I would say, their toughest matchup of the season. But you even have them dropping a game to Oklahoma the week before that. So this Auburn team, and then dropping a game to Arkansas the week before that. So this is definitely not an Auburn team that is anything special, but I still think they can pull it off and score. It would not be a season high because they did score, I believe, 45. Oh, no, they scored – never mind. They scored 73 against Alabama A&M, but obviously that's Alabama A&M. But I do think they can have a 40-plus point victory and kind of put a show on.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting, man, because Vanderbilt has basically come out of nowhere, and they're playing some really good football. Auburn has underperformed yet again this year. I mean, that whole fan base is getting pretty antsy because this was an Auburn team, you know, a few years ago that was competing at the top of the SEC, and now they're struggling to get out of the bottom. So we'll definitely have to see the result at 11:45 tomorrow, which is, man, that is a weird kickoff time. I don't know where they came out with that. Moving on to our 2:30 window, though, on CBS Paramount Plus, we got the number 1 Oregon Ducks going to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to play the Michigan Wolverines. What are your thoughts on this game, man? Oregon undefeated. They look really good on defense and on offense. Michigan, really only a good defensive team, so something's got to give here. What are your thoughts? Do you think Michigan keeps it close?
I don't think Michigan keeps it close. I think there are teams in the Big Ten and in college football that can keep it close. I don't think Michigan's one of them. I think Michigan will keep it manageable for the first quarter. I think you could see maybe Oregon goes up 14-7 at the end of the first. But final score for this, give me Oregon winning 42-17. I do think Michigan could maybe pull off 17 points. I can see them getting 2 tutties and maybe a field goal as well, but that's what I'm going to have to cap them at. I don't see them even getting to 20 points, and I honestly think even 17 could be a little generous. They might only score 14, but I definitely think Oregon puts on a show and wins 42-14 or 17. So give me Oregon. Michigan is a super disappointing team. Obviously, they've had a lot of turnover, a lot of change.
They've got no quarterback.
No quarterback. I mean, it's a whole mess. But I just think Oregon is a better team, despite all of that. Even if Michigan was in a better spot, even if Michigan was a top 15 team right now, I would still give it to Oregon. I really would, because Oregon is just that team. And I truly believe, it's weird to say they're in the Big Ten, but I truly think they are the best Big Ten team currently.
Yeah.
So I think they'll retain that the whole season. So give me Oregon winning a pretty nice, not easy victory, because again, I can see the first quarter being kind of close, kind of competitive, but I do see Oregon getting that separation even as soon as the second. So give me 42-14 Oregon.
I like that pick. I'm gonna go 38-13 Oregon. I do think Oregon's just got too much firepower. Michigan's pretty disjointed. They have no quarterback, and they only really run the ball, which is fine if you want to play time of possession, but you're going up against a team like Oregon that has all the firepower. You're not going to keep up when all is said and done. So, yeah, I think Oregon easily runs away with the victory here to move to 9-0 and 6-0 in the Big Ten. Moving on to another game in the 2:30 window, the 4-3 Florida Gators going to play Georgia. And I think this is a neutral site game, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it is. It's being played in Jacksonville, Florida. So Georgia enters this game as a 14.5-point favorite. Florida maybe finding a little something on offense and maybe a little bit on defense. Georgia has been inconsistent at times on offense and defense. What are your thoughts? Do you think Florida can keep it close at least for a little bit on Saturday?
I think they definitely do. Keeping it close, I think, is going to happen without a doubt. Do I see Florida pulling off the W? I don't. Being realistic, I really don't. I think I think we're going to see, not how bad, because Georgia obviously is not a bad team, but I think we're going to see Georgia for who they really are come postseason. I don't think that'll be a good thing. I think Georgia will be one of the first teams out in the playoffs. I really, really do. I think Georgia is going to be a team that finishes pretty high up, but then kind of fizzles out come postseason. So
yeah,
my prediction for Georgia. But again, I see them being a team that is super, super, super consistent and super, super, super successful during the regular season. And this is still the regular season. So this will be no exception, but I think it'll be back and forth for the first half. I think we'll go into halftime. And Georgia will have a 21-14 lead. I really do. I think we go into halftime, Georgia has a 21-14 lead. But that's where I kind of see Florida's success stopping. I think my final score prediction is 35-17 Georgia. I think Florida scores most of their points, if not again. I've said this in another game for this week. I think that this could be an example of a team that scores most, if not all, of their points in the first and is super successful, super competitive, and then fizzles out and can't hold Georgia's strength back for that second half. So, again, I think that it'll be a 35-17 W for Georgia and for the Bulldogs.
I think if Florida comes out and plays Kentucky, or like if they come out and play like they did against Kentucky, this is going to be a hell of a game, because Florida, couple of weeks ago, they're coming off of a bye week. They whooped up on Kentucky 48-20. Meanwhile, Georgia struggled and won 13-12. They handled Kentucky way better than Georgia did. If they can come out like that, I think Florida is going to absolutely have a shot on Saturday. With that being said, I'm going to still say Georgia, but I don't feel particularly good about it. Give me Georgia 31, Florida 27. I think Florida keeps it pretty close, but I would not be shocked if Georgia or Florida pulled off the upset.
I can see it. I can definitely see it.
The only thing with Georgia is I don't think they're going to be the clear-cut favorite to win the national championship. They've been way too inconsistent in bad times. Yeah, they're 6-1, but even in their wins, they're extremely inconsistent. So it all depends on what Georgia team shows up. Is it going to be the team that showed up at Texas and absolutely, drilled Texas 30-15? Or is this going to be the team that will give up a lot of points, like they did against Bama? We'll have to wait and see. It'll be an interesting game. One of us is going to be – well, obviously, we should both be right. We both picked Georgia. I don't feel particularly good with the Georgia pick, but I think Georgia still finds a way in a relatively ugly game to pull it out. Our next game that we're going over in the 2:30 window, it's on ESPN. We've got Texas Tech and Iowa State. Texas Tech can score, so can Iowa State. Iowa State's the number 11 team in the country. Do you think Iowa State stays undefeated? And, oh, by the way, I'm going to the game tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
So
bro,
it's going to be it's going to be a fun atmosphere. I'll be sitting in the student section, so I'll have to take pictures. And
bro, you're sitting in the right spot. Have you been to an Iowa State game before? This is the first time.
It's my first one. So my buddy goes to school there, and he sent me a message and was like, hey, I've got an extra student section ticket. You want it? I'm like, hell yeah, sign me up. So obviously I'll be repping Nebraska. I'll be repping a little bit of Iowa State too, because I pull for Iowa State. I hope Iowa State wins the Big 12 this year, the way they've been playing. So, but
that is the game to go to right there. That I think it's going to be
a hell of a game.
Games of the weekend. I really do. I think we're looking at low-key possibly one of the closest matchups of the weekend because, like you said, Texas Tech can absolutely score. Iowa State number 11 Iowa State can absolutely score. Iowa State has been on a tear this season. Iowa State has honestly low-key been a team that has been building up and boosting their success for the last couple of years, and I really, really, really think that this could be their year. I mean, this is obviously the first year of 12 playoff teams, but I think this could be their year. First year of 12 playoff teams, I think we're going to see Iowa State as one of those 12 teams because Iowa State is a really, 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 really consistent team on both sides of the football, and I think they're going to show that against a really high-powered Texas Tech. Give me Iowa State winning on a drive and winning 31-24. I think we're going to see a couple of field goals made from each team. We're going to see some touchdowns, and then we're going to see Iowa State win 31-24 on a late touchdown drive. That's my prediction, but it could be flipped. I can absolutely see it being flipped and see Texas Tech coming out on top in a late touchdown drive. So I think it's going to be determined by 7 to 10 points, and I think it's going to be Iowa State when it's all said and done.
I've got a high-scoring matchup, man. High scoring.
Let me hear it.
Give me Iowa State 45, Texas Tech 41.
Ooh,
I think we're going to see a shootout. I think we're going to see an instant classic Saturday afternoon in Ames. Both of these offenses can score. Texas Tech is very high-powered. Their quarterback is 185 for 292, 2,063 yards, 17 touchdowns, so only 3 interceptions. And we got a couple of pretty high-profile receivers, too. Knoll for Iowa State has 37 receptions for 681 yards, 3 touchdowns. Kelly for Texas Tech, 60 receptions for 609 yards, 3 touchdowns. You've got a couple of guys there that can absolutely blow the top off of a defense when given the opportunity. There's going to be a lot of big plays in this game. I think this is going to be your typical Big 12 showdown with a lot of offense. But I do have Iowa State coming out on top. I give them the advantage at home. If this was played in Lubbock, I would give Texas Tech that advantage, just based on how things have been going. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a hell of a game. I can't wait to experience the tailgating atmosphere. I can't wait to experience the atmosphere in that stadium. It's going to be electric, man. I'm stoked.
Bro, you're going to have to give us the review next episode. We're going to have to start with that because no matter who wins, that environment and that atmosphere is going to be electric, bro. I'm excited for you, man. That is the best example of going to a game that's a win-win because you're not pulling. I mean, obviously you have a team you're pulling for, but it's not the Huskers. So whoever wins, you know what I mean? It's just going to be watching some exciting football, stress-free. Not having to worry about the boys. It'll be nice. So that'll be good, man. Let us know how that goes because that is going to be a game, bro. I'm excited.
I'll definitely let everybody know. And I'll tell you what, Nebraska, which we're going to get to here in a few picks. I'll be wearing my Husker jersey there, but I'll also be repping a Iowa State hoodie, at least for the game. So I'll be repping the boys, and I'll be repping Iowa State. Just so I can kind of blend in there. And, you know, I'm not going to be heartbroken if Iowa State loses for sure. But I tell you what, I'll probably not have a voice come Sunday because I'll probably be screaming with everybody.
You better not, bro. That's how you know you did a good job at a football game as a fan when you don't have a voice the next day. That was me after the Rutgers game when we played the Rutgers. I had no voice. So that's how you know you had it was a good game, and B, you did a good job as a fan. So you better not have
yes, sir.
You better not have
yes, sir.
Next episode. You better not have a voice all the way until our next show, bro. That's what we're expecting.
Oh man. Oh man.
That's a little tough. I don't know.
That'd be tough, man, because I've got to I sing too, so I'm like, I've got to have a little bit of a voice. So
a little bit. Can't lose too much of it.
No. But yeah, should be a fun game in Ames tomorrow afternoon. So yeah, I'll give everybody the honest review of the atmosphere in the game, and that should be a fun conversation next week. Absolutely. Moving on to the next game in our 2:30 window, we've got the number 13 Indiana Hoosiers, who have basically taken the world by storm. They're 8-0, 5-0 in the Big Ten. They're 8-0 for the first time in program history. Going up against a pretty tough Michigan State team. And there's possibility that Rourke doesn't play for Indiana. He might be fighting that hand injury that he got at Nebraska or against Nebraska. What are your thoughts? Do you think Indiana finds a way to pull off another multi-possession win?
Easily. Michigan State is not that team. Michigan State has not been that team for a couple of seasons. And Indiana seemingly is that team. You said it best. I mean, they're undefeated. They have one of the best, if not the best, Big Ten team currently, I would say, honestly. And yes, of course, there's Ohio State and Penn State. But because of Indiana's climb and their sudden ascent and just what they've been able to do consistently, and obviously they haven't had the hardest schedule in the beginning half, but they've been able to prove themselves because obviously they've had some games where they've had to prove themselves, and they've done that. This will be no exception. The only game that I think is going to knock them from finishing their season perfect in the Big Ten is against Ohio State. They've got Ohio State November 23rd, and I do think now who knows where Ohio State will be at that point. But looking at those two teams, I do think Ohio State, I think that's the only loss they pick up in the Big Ten is to Ohio State. But I think they pick that up. Michigan State, like you alluded to, obviously it's not their season. They're not that team. But they are having some success and are building up in certain areas. But I think Indiana wins it, and I think Indiana wins it from the first. I think they'll win it from the first quarter on. Give me Indiana 38, Michigan State 13.
I like that pick a lot. I do think Indiana pulls away. I'm just going to make it quick. Michigan State's not going to be in this game for very long. They don't have enough firepower to keep up. Give me Indiana 41, Michigan State 13. I think Indiana pulls off another multi-score win, and they stay a team that has never trailed this season, which through 9 games would be absolutely crazy. Through 8 games, it's crazy. But yeah, I do think Indiana takes care of business. Kurt Signetti really has that thing rolling, which is kind of insane in year one. but that's what happens when you get, your whole coaching staff. Michigan State is better than Nebraska. Okay, you're just hating, bro. Okay.
I don't know about that one. I think that one we can definitely agree is not true.
That is definitely not true. Indiana is better than Nebraska for sure.
Okay, yeah. If you would have said that one, I think that's the reason he didn't say that one, because that one's a little too obvious right now. But Michigan State, nah. There's
no. Michigan State is not. Absolutely not.
Someone that agrees with you on that one, except maybe a Michigan State fan. But even then, I don't
right.
know.
Well, funny story about a Michigan State fan. So on one of the sports talk shows locally, there's a sports talk show post Nebraska games. It's literally called Big Red Overreaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on 1620 The Zone. It is.
I love that, bro.
Freaking, it is hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious listening to some of those calls. And one of the callers that consistently calls in is a Michigan State fan. And he's like, all I know is you guys will never beat Michigan State again. Go green. And that's all he says. And I'm like, dude, Michigan State sucks. Get out of here. They're bad.
They gotta hold on to something.
They're bad. I mean, you look at Michigan State, they didn't even play Ohio State close. And Ohio State had glaring issues. And you look at Oregon, they didn't play Oregon remotely close. They beat Iowa, which, okay, that's great. Iowa is kind of mediocre, as they always been. And then they lose to a bad Michigan team last week. Don't come at me saying that Michigan State's better. Okay, come on now. But
not this season. In other seasons, you could make that argument, but not this season.
When D'Antonio was the head coach and Michigan State was a top 10 team, they obviously were better.
Oh, yeah. That's not the case now.
No, that's not the case now. And with no divisions and everything, it's kind of made things tougher for everybody. But, yeah, I do think Indiana really, really pulls away in this one. To keep going and move to 9-0 for the first time in program history, which sets up. Yeah. Well, and it sets up pretty well. I think they have a bye week next week, and then they play Ohio State the week after that. So that'll be a huge matchup. And I do think there's a lot that offense for Indiana can take advantage of with Ohio State's defense. Nebraska made sure to kind of exploit some of those issues. So put a lot of film out there for people to take advantage against Ohio State. So that makes me feel kind of good.
That is true. We did.
Yeah. Moving on to another 2:30 game. This could be an upset special. Who knows? You got Kansas State going down to Houston. Houston's kind of scuttled along a little bit. They beat Utah last week, but then they get killed by Kansas the week before. They beat TCU. They get shut out against Iowa State. They get shut out against Cincinnati. No one knows what to make of this Houston team except they probably suck.
For real.
I'm sorry if there's any Houston Cougar fans, listening, but sorry, the truth can hurt sometimes. And then you got Kansas State, who right now is 7-1, 4-1 in conference, who they're looking to keep winning and likely get into the Big 12 championship and maybe become one of the teams into the 12-team playoff. What do you think, man? Do you think Kansas State kind of sleepwalks into this one and Houston can come up and bite them a little bit? Or do you think Kansas State comes in and takes care of business?
I think Kansas State takes care of business for sure. I definitely think they'll come in and win. Now, I don't think it's going to be a super high-scoring game. I honestly don't think Kansas State is going to go on a scoring run, but I do think they're going to control the pace of the game. And I think that's going to honestly end. I think the it being a super high-scoring affair. Give me Kansas State beating Houston when it's all said and done. Give me 24-10. 24-10. Obviously, that's a multi-score win for Kansas State, but I don't see them making it too big of a separation beyond there. I don't see Kansas State scoring above 24 points in this matchup. I do think Houston will show up defensively to an extent and keep them to, 24 points is obviously still you're getting the score ran up a little bit, but I don't
Yeah.
see them getting the score ran up above that. So give me 24-10. Kansas State continues their bid for a potential playoff run.
I think Kansas State absolutely kills Houston this weekend. I think it'll be a 31-10 game. I think Houston can keep it close, maybe in the first quarter, but I do think Kansas State has a little bit too much firepower to eventually then pull away and win by 3 scores. Moving on to our next game in the 2:30 window, it's UCLA and Nebraska. Nebraska had a great showing against Ohio State. There were some questionable officiating that happened all game long. The big question is, what Nebraska team are we going to get to show up? If it's the team against Columbus, this game could go sideways for UCLA pretty quick. Nebraska could win this one by multiple scores. So my whole thought process is clearly in my little headline thing underneath my name, Satterfield is not calling plays this weekend. So maybe we'll see a little bit more play creativity from Nebraska's offense, maybe a little bit more initiative to attack downfield because UCLA's defense is kind of in the bottom 10 in the country as far as giving up pass plays, and they're kind of mid-pack in the Big Ten as far as, rush defense. I think there's a lot Nebraska can take advantage of. I think if we get the defensive performance that we did last week from this Nebraska Blackshirts defense, I think Nebraska is going to have a heyday on UCLA. Give me Nebraska winning this one 38-13. I think they're going to have their best offensive showing this year, knowing that they're going to have a different play caller. I think they're going to be in a little bit of a better rhythm, and I think they should be able to take care of business to go bowling for the first time since 2016. What are your thoughts?
First of all, I love the enthusiasm, and how could we not have it after last week's game? If we got blown out, if it was an Indiana repeat, we would not be sitting here enthusiastic or excited or anything. I think the fact that we showed up against Ohio State and only lost by a score just proves that we are that team that people thought we were before that Indiana game. Now, we've had plenty of seasons post 2016. You shouted out our last bowl berth where we have lost games by a score, plenty of seasons, plenty of times, and have lost several games by just a score.
Yeah.
But that was not that game to me. To me, that was we kept Ohio State honest. We showed up, and it was just a far better showing. I absolutely have us beating UCLA, but I think we're going to not struggle, but I think the first quarter is going to be super close. Super, super close while we find our footing. And then I think it'll be pretty competitive throughout. But I do think Nebraska walks away. Give me Nebraska winning 28-17. I do think that we could have a couple of scores given up to UCLA, and so that's why I'm giving them 17. Maybe it's only 14, but I definitely think UCLA can hang up 14 to 17 points on us. But on the other end, I absolutely see the Huskers pulling this off, and I think we've seen the Huskers go into the second half of a football game and fall asleep and not do anything. I think it'll be the opposite of that this game. I think you might see a 14-14 at halftime, or maybe a 14-7 or a 14-10 at halftime. And then I think the Huskers will open it up and really, really show that they have their footing in the second half. And so I think this could be one of the best second halves we've had as a team this season. Now, obviously, if I have us only scoring 28, I don't have us opening up a can in the second half and just scoring, 3-4 plus touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think we could finish 28, and I also could push it to 35. So I think Huskers finish 28-35, and UCLA finishes 14-17. So at the end of the day, it's a win. It's a good win. I don't think we're going to be looking at a win that's close. I don't think we're going to be looking at a 1-2 score game. I definitely think the Huskers will keep control of the game in the second half.
Yeah, if we get the performance like we did last week against the number 4 team in the country in Ohio State, Nebraska literally threw Ohio State's game plan for a loop. Ohio State did not know what to do. They hit a couple of big pass plays, and if they had not hit those 2 pass plays, Nebraska would have won last Saturday. They would have pulled off probably the biggest upset of the year, outside of Vanderbilt over Alabama. But it turns out Alabama is not a great football team either. So again, it just depends on what Husker team we get to show up. We could have a Nebraska team that comes in and kind of sleepwalks, and this game's kind of a slog, and everybody's sweating it out, and Nebraska may pull it out. I'm hoping we get a Nebraska team that has the mentality of, let's put the kill switch on now. Let's see if we could take them out of the game early. And this is a UCLA team that is 2-5. It's not going to take much for them to take all hope away from UCLA. So if Nebraska could come out on fire like they did against Colorado and get up like, say, 28-0 and continue scoring from there, Nebraska's going to have a heyday. And that's what I'm hoping for. I'm not hoping for a close game. I don't want a close game. I want them to take care of business, get to 6-3, hit the bye week, and then you're going to USC the week after, which is a game that I think if they can show up like they did against Ohio State, they could win. They could beat USC. That's going to be a stadium with a lot of Husker fans inside. There's a lot of Husker followers in LA. So it could be a home game away from home, so to speak, in USC in a couple of weeks. But yeah, they just need to start taking care of business this week. They take care of business this week. They go out and beat USC the week after, or in 2 more weeks. You're talking a team that could finish 8-4 to 9-3. They come out with the mentality they did against Ohio State. They can win the next 4 games. I don't think that's too far-fetched. I have them losing at least 1, which would still put them at 8-4, which still has me feeling damn good. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Husker team shows up. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like everybody came out with that championship mentality in practice this week. So hopefully that shows out at home on Saturday. It's been a while since they played in front of the home fans. I know the atmosphere is going to be pretty amped. So let's hope. We'll talk more in our Husker segment, more thoughts, what this Husker team can do going forward. But moving on, we've got our 6:30 window now. We've got the Louisville Cardinals going up against the number 11 Clemson Tigers. Clemson is still undefeated in conference. And then there's Louisville, who has played most everybody tough this season, even in their losses. What are your thoughts? Do you think Louisville has what it takes on Saturday night to get the upset over Clemson? Or do you think Clemson finds a way to pull away and stay undefeated in conference play?
Give me Louisville. We talked about, I think, episode 1 of the College Football Junkies, we talked about Louisville versus Miami was one of the matchups we talked about. And it was a really close game. Miami won, but it was a really, really close game. And Louisville showed that they could keep up with one of those top 10 teams. And I really, really think that Clemson is having the most success they've had in the last few seasons. And they're starting to look more like a team that could make a playoff push again and be one of those, and they're currently looking like one of the best, if not the best conference team, which has not been the case the last few seasons either. But I've got to give it to Louisville. I think it's going to be a punch for punch game where we're trading and not even trading three and outs, because we've talked about games today where I think teams will trade three and outs or just defensive stops. I think we'll be trading touchdowns. I think these teams will be trading touchdowns back and forth, and this will be a pretty high scoring game. Give me Louisville winning 42-35.
Good pick. Good
Shootout.
pick.
Back and forth up till the final. I think it could end on a playoff drive, playoff drive, touchdown drive.
Yeah.
I think it could absolutely finish on a touchdown drive by Louisville. I think we're looking at them winning the game in the last 5 minutes. I think whoever wins the game will win it in the last 5 minutes with a touchdown or a field goal, but I'm calling a touchdown, a tutty.
I could definitely see that. I do see it as being a very high scoring game. I'm going to go Clemson, though. I think Clemson hands Louisville their fourth loss. But it's going to be a very high-scoring game. The over-under is set to 62.5. I think it's going to go over by quite a bit. Give me Clemson. I think they get a last-second field goal to beat Louisville, 45-42. I think it's going to go way over the total. And I think Louisville's the cover play if you want to bet the spread. I think Louisville plus 10 is an easy bet. Moving on to another game in the 6:30 window. It kicks off on ABC and ESPN Plus. You got the number 10 Texas A&M Aggies, who they're playing some really good football with their first-year head coach. And then you got South Carolina, who they're a pretty tough team, all told. What are your thoughts on this one? Do you think South Carolina pulls out the upset against Texas A&M? Or do you think Texas A&M just continues to roll like they have been all year long?
That's a great question. I definitely think this could be an upset type of game, but Texas A&M wins it all. I don't think Texas A&M goes that far. They're 10 right now, I think. But I don't think this will be the game to knock them out of that potential finishing in the playoff thing. I think this will be a game that they can win. They played LSU last. I predicted LSU to beat them, and obviously Texas A&M found a way to get it done, and they looked really, really, really good. They looked like I don't know. I don't think, again, I'm not calling them a team that's going to get, again, we had Sports Maniac said they're going to go all the way and win it all or whatever. That I'm not pulling with. I'm not going to go that far. But I do think that they showed in that 38-23 win against LSU that they are a team that can beat one of the best of them, and South Carolina is not one of the best of them. South Carolina is 4-3. They're a pretty mid-level team in their conference, and yes, they've had some decent wins and decent showings this season, but I think Texas A&M is going to win. Now, the thing you have to remember is this is a mid to late season matchup against two pretty battle-tested teams. This isn't going to be a blowout. We're not going to be looking at, I don't think Texas A&M wins by 3-4+ scores, because yes, Texas A&M, in my opinion, is the better team. And after that win over LSU, I'm a little more on board with them at least being a playoff team. I don't think, again, Sports Maniac is saying they win it all. I don't think they go to that level. I think they'll probably be potentially a playoff team, but one that loses in that first round. I could be wrong, but I just see them being one of those early exit playoff teams that still makes the playoffs, which is huge. This is the first season of 12 teams. Any team that makes that bid is historic. So I think Texas A&M has a chance, but I definitely think even if they do pick up a loss or lose that top 12 footing, it won't be in this game. So give me Texas A&M. Give me Texas A&M winning by 10. Man, that's a tough one, actually. Let me think. This is a tough one. Yeah, give me Texas A&M winning by 10 points, 34-24.
I like that pick. I do think South Carolina can score some points. I do think they will. I think they're going to make Texas A&M sweat this one out a little bit. They may actually have a shot to win this one. I'm not going to pick South Carolina to win it. But I'm going to say Texas A&M wins 38-35. I think they find a way to eke out a field goal win. I don't think they're going to particularly feel good about it. I think they feel like they're a team that can win this game by multiple scores. South Carolina's got some athletes, though, and you got to account for their athletes. They've got one of the fastest receivers in the country on their side. So, again, we'll see. I don't think Texas A&M is going to win the national championship this year. I think they're a team that'll probably make the SEC championship and probably make it into the first round of the college football playoff, but I don't think they're going to do much past that.
So either.
Yeah, they're good. They're definitely a lot better than they were with Jimbo Fisher as their head coach. They are a playoff sleeper team. Okay, that I could kind of agree on.
Maybe they get past the first round, they could surprise some people, but
I could definitely see playoff sleeper. I don't think playoff favorite is going to be a way to, paint this team. But they're good. They're a good team. There ain't no doubting that. And I think they're going to go to the SEC championship. I think they're going to play Georgia in the SEC championship. I think Alabama is going to be kept out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to be in for quite the SEC championship if that unfolds. Here's a big question for you, Montana. Texas A&M beats Georgia in the SEC championship. Will your thoughts on them change going into the playoff?
No, because I also don't think Georgia is a legitimate playoff. Like, I think Georgia is.
Georgia finds a way, though.
They do. That's the one. That's why I'm struggling, because Georgia does find a way, and they've done that so many times.
Great teams find a way.
They do, and they've got a great coach that knows how to help them find a way. So what I will say is, yes, I do think my opinion of Texas A&M would shift a little bit, and I think I would look at them more as a team that maybe makes it to the semi of the college football playoffs, but I don't think it would go beyond that, because currently I have them losing in the first round. Currently I have them losing. I do have them making the playoffs, but I don't have them making it past the first. But if they beat Georgia, I think my opinion will shift a little bit, and I think I can see them at least being a team that makes it maybe to the semis, but doesn't make it past the semis.
I could see that. My answer to my own question is I do think it would shift the conversation on Texas A&M. Just looking at the athletes that Georgia has, they have one of the more expensive rosters in the country, and they're probably going in. They're probably. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. My headphones just died. So, but as I was saying, Texas A&M, while not being one of the favorites, if they find a way to beat Georgia, who is probably going to be a favorite since they have been there, I think that would probably put Texas A&M in a favorite category if they were to find a way to beat Georgia in the SEC championship. So
their stock a lot, and their stock has already been boosted several times this season, I feel like.
Yeah.
Honestly, partially in that win against LSU, because I really thought LSU was going to be that team, and they obviously are not. They still are 16th, and who knows, maybe LSU finishes close to – I don't think they'll get in that top 12, but maybe they get close to breaking back into it. But I definitely think Texas A&M's stock would be boosted. And, yeah, boosted to a favorite, I think they would be boosted, beating Georgia because, like you said, they always find a way. Georgia is a team that, annoyingly enough, they haven't even been a team like Alabama that is like just ground pounded these victories in. They've been down in some of these games, and then they just figure it out. They figure it out, and the final score, when that final whistle is blown, They found a way. They figured it out. And it's a mix between the players that are on that team and then that coaching staff. It is just an elite football school. And they're going to remain in that spot. So Georgia obviously is a favorite currently, and I think they'll continue their favorite position just because, like you said, they've been there and they've proven they know how to get it done. So it's going to be interesting, though, man. That would be a super nice matchup to see in that championship game. That SEC championship would be, I think it would be competitive. I think that would possibly be the most competitive matchup we could see in that game.
Oh, absolutely. Just looking at how both teams are playing, it's going to be one of the better SEC championship matchups that we've seen in recent memory.
Without a doubt.
Includes, the Georgia-Alabama matchups, which, by the way, have been pretty good matchups to begin with.
They have been.
So it'll be interesting. Obviously, we'll keep tabs on A&M. If they can keep it going in South Carolina, it's going to make the conversation a little bit more interesting with them. So we'll definitely keep tabs and continue talking about them while they're, putting themselves in a position to maybe make a little bit of noise in the college football playoff. Moving on into another game, this is going to be a true Big Ten slog. It's at 6:30 on NBC. We've got the Wisconsin Badgers going to Iowa City, playing in Kinnick Stadium against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa is currently the 3-point home favorite. Kinnick Stadium is tough at night, man. What are your thoughts on this game at Kinnick Stadium?
Well, like you said, it's a tough stadium. At night, I mean, that's no matter who's playing in that stadium. We've seen Ohio State. We've seen those top tier teams go there, and they've been pushed to the limit or beat. Wisconsin is not an Ohio State or a Penn State or a top tier team. They're a good team. Wisconsin is a good team. I'm not trying to downplay their success just because I'm a Husker fan and because I think we're a better team and whatever. But I really don't think Wisconsin has been an elite type of program this season. Either way, I think these two teams are paired up and matched pretty evenly against each other. I think these are two teams that are pretty evenly matched up skill-wise, and I think we're going to see a Big Ten classic, and I think we're going to see a game that is lower scoring, and I think we're going to see a defensive showing on both sides of the ball, and I do think we are going to see Iowa walk away with a home win because, playing in that home stadium, that is a huge boost. I mean, as Husker fans, we know it more than anyone else. Memorial Stadium, it's no Memorial Stadium, but any home turf advantage is huge. And when fans get loud, when fans are into it, and when it's a game that matters, everyone shows up. So I think Iowa wins. I think it'll be a lower scoring game. Give me Iowa winning by 1 touchdown, 28-21.
I like that pick. I like that pick a lot. I think it's going to be even lower scoring than that. Both teams are meeting with bowl eligibility on the line. I'm going with a weird score. Give me a scoregami here. I think Iowa wins 16-12. I think, yes, and I think there's going to be a safety involved at one point in the game. Iowa's trash.
I don't know.
I don't know about that. They're decent.
Yeah.
But I think, with their both defenses, I think are going to come to play. I think Iowa makes a couple of more plays to push them, to be that 4 points better. But give me a scoregami, man. I'm all for weirdness in the Big Ten, and I think a score of 16-12 would just add to that weirdness factor. Whether it come from 4 field goals or, a touchdown, a field goal, and a safety. I don't know how it's all going to come out, but I'm all for it.
No, and I'm with you. I can definitely see it being an even lower scoring game than what I called, because it's going to be a Big Ten Classic, and I think the defenses are going to show up, and I think we're going to see a lot of not turnovers, but a lot of ball changing throughout the game. And I don't think anyone's really going to have a comfortable hand on the ball or a comfortable hand on the game. I think we're going to see a really close back and forth game until it's the end. So I'm excited. I think whoever comes out on top, obviously, like you said, bowl eligibility is on the line. And at this point of the season, it is on the line because you never know how the rest of your season could play out. And between these two teams, both of them definitely have some decently tough matchups. Both of them have us on their schedule remaining. And so I think that could definitely be a loss for both of these teams, possibly. So both of these teams need to pick up this win, and I think they're going to play like it. So I'm excited. I definitely think Iowa wins it at home, gets that bowl eligibility, and boosts their stock a little bit. But again, Iowa they're pretty evenly matched. They're kind of mid-level Big Ten this season. I would say that's where middle of the pack.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. Should be a good one in Kinnick. So yeah, I'll definitely be watching that once I get done partying after Iowa State's game.
W.
So that'll be fun. Moving on to another game here, 6:45. We've got Kentucky going to number 7 Tennessee. I think this is a game where Tennessee can really play to their strength, and I don't think Kentucky is going to keep this a game for very long. Kentucky looked like they could play things tough. They've kind of fallen off as of late. I think Tennessee pulls away pretty easily in this one. Give me Tennessee 38, Kentucky 13. I think Kentucky maybe finds a way to keep it competitive for the first quarter. Tennessee's got way too much firepower for them to keep up. What are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet because I definitely agree with you that it's not going to be close for very long. I'd give it a quarter, if not half of a quarter, of being a decently close game. And then I think Tennessee puts their skill on display and give me Tennessee 35-7. Even though, I mean, that's one touchdown for Kentucky, they've proven themselves to possibly only be a one touchdown team against a team with this high of caliber, because Tennessee is a high caliber team and they're currently number 7, I believe. And so they're definitely no slouch, and they're looking like they could be one of those top level playoff teams. And even though obviously Kentucky is nowhere near even top 25 or top 30, continuing your win record, like your win streak, will boost your stock. So even though you're not winning against a top ranked team, continuing that win record is going to be big. So that's super important and imperative for this team to do. And I think they'll do exactly that. I think they'll show up. Could have sleep now on the alternative side. It's not Tennessee losing, but it's Tennessee sleepwalking, and maybe they have a sloppier start. But still, if anything, I will give Kentucky 14 points, and I'm still going to say I think that even if Tennessee has a sloppy start, they could score 35, if not 42 plus easily, because they could just open it up in that second half. So I think Tennessee wins, even if they have a sloppy game. But Tennessee's played pretty good football this season. Kind of a question. How far do you think Tennessee can go? Because I think Tennessee, remember last season, looked really, really good, and people were thinking they could go all the way, and then they had some really disappointing games towards the end of the season. Do you think Tennessee will keep their stock high enough until postseason to maybe be a team to go to the finals or at least the semis?
I think they can make it to at least the second round. I do think they have the firepower to really keep up with most anybody. My only question is, at times their quarterback play has been very inconsistent. So if they can get rid of those inconsistencies, I think they can compete with most anybody in the country. I think they could, if they were to get rid of those inconsistencies, they can win the SEC. Like, they're a good team. They've got as much talent as anybody in the SEC does. So I do think they make it to at least second round.
For sure. I think, again, I mean, you just said it perfectly. I think they've got the talent, and they also have the remaining schedule it's doable. So I definitely think we will see them in the postseason, and I think we will see them in that second round. Will it be a win in the second round? It depends on who they're matched up against. I'm super excited once we get even closer to seeing what those matchups might look like. But it's going to be a good one no matter what. And I think we can both agree that between those games, the Kansas State, I mean, there's really not going to be any upsets probably between those games. I think those teams will establish themselves and hold true, and this one especially.
Right. Absolutely. Moving on to our last game of the slate. This is kind of a must-win for both of these teams. We got USC and Washington meeting up in a traditional Big Ten clash. Oh my gosh. Yeah, everybody knows about the USC-Washington Big Ten rivalry, right?
It's legendary. It's maybe now it will be. after this game, after tomorrow, it's going to be.
But yeah, all jokes aside, this is a must-win for both of these teams. USC, extremely disappointing. They thought that they can come into the Big Ten and maybe put their name into the hat of being a conference contender. Well, they turned more into a pretender this year. They're 2-4 in the conference, 4-4. You've got Washington, who lost most everybody from last year's team that went to the national championship, and they lost their coach. I wasn't very high on Washington going into the season, so I'm not at all shocked that they're 4-4. But seeing that both of these teams, like, especially when you thought one of these teams, like USC, was going to be in another stratosphere, like, you would think USC was a top 10 team going into this game. That's what everybody expected. That's what a lot of people expected. But now it's a battle to maybe get into the middle tier of the conference. It's kind of weird, man. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it is literally a battle to just get into the middle. To get a bowl game, I mean, it's a battle to garner some sort of respect for your first Big Ten season because it's not a good start. And USC definitely came in with a certain like confidence level. Washington, I wouldn't say quite the same, but USC and you would have thought that Washington would have came in with more coming off of their season, but I would say USC came in with more confidence, more arrogance, possibly I could even call it. And they've had a tough transition, and so has Washington. Washington's had an extremely tough transition. Playing Indiana, I mean, if anyone knows if anything, they had a better game than Nebraska had against Indiana. So, but still, we know what it's like to lose against Indiana and have a tough one. Tough game against Iowa, 40-16. So it's, they've definitely had their fair share of losses, but in that Washington has had wins against teams like Michigan, and they've had close, hard-fought games against now lower level teams like the Rutgers. When that game happened, they were definitely a higher level team, but now they're definitely not at that same level. But Washington, in my personal opinion, has a really, 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 really good chance at pulling this game off. And at the end of the day, is Washington a better team than USC? I don't know if I can answer that with a yes or a no completely until I see this game, because I think these are two pretty evenly matched up teams that are both not very good this season. But I definitely think there is one between these two that can pull this game off, but I don't think it's going to be convincingly by 3-4 touchdowns or even 2 or even one full score. I think this is going to be a field goal for Washington. I think Washington wins it 31-28.
I've also got Washington. I do think USC has looked pretty defeated. Outside of their game against Rutgers, they've looked pretty defeated in their matchups. And I think Washington's going to be rocking. So, yeah, give me Washington 31-27. I think USC gets one step closer to firing their head coach after this weekend. Yeah,
I think he's out. I think this is, if not his last season, they might give him one more shot, but I think he might be out after this season because I think USC still finish out and have a decent finish to their season? Maybe, but I mean, listen to this final. I mean, they've got, if they lose against Washington, they're 4-5, and then you've got Nebraska. And I'm sorry, but I don't care that it's at home. If you're losing to Washington and Nebraska's coming off of a win against UCLA, and Nebraska's coming off, I mean, they have a bye week as well, I believe. So we both have a bye week, but
there's going to be a lot of Husker fans.
Lots of Husker fans coming off of a loss and having a bye week is way different than coming off of a win and having a bye week. Because when you come off having a win, having a bye week, yes, you're still preparing, but you're coming off of that high. You have that high of that win. When you lose, it's what can we do to fix this, and there's so much more preparation. And so Nebraska, I believe truly, even if USC pulls off the win against Washington, I think Nebraska is going to still beat USC or still has a good chance. But I think USC loses to Nebraska. I think USC, UCLA, that's a match made in heaven. Those are two pretty evenly matched teams, and that could be a pretty high scoring shot for shot game. Could USC win that? Yes, but then you're 5 and 6? 5 and 6, I believe, possibly. And then your final game is against number 8 Notre Dame. So you're looking at missing a bowl game. And if they miss a bowl game, I think Riley's out. I think if they miss a bowl game, that's going to be that. And I think they're in danger of missing one.
I think even if they get to 6 and 6, I think Lincoln Riley's out because their goal isn't to make the Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit or whatever, or the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I could throw a lot of lower tier bowl games out there. They're going to come in and compete for conference championships and maybe even a national championship. And they've got as much talent as anybody in the country. I mean, where's the disconnect at with these players? Where's the disconnect at with these coaches? Because with the amount of talent that they have, they should have 7 wins maybe this year. But yet they're sitting at 500 at 4-4, and they're in, especially if they lose today, they're in danger of missing a bowl game.
Yeah. And I think they are. I think they're going to. Again, obviously it's a close call, winning by 3 points to 7 points. It could go both ways, but I think Washington pulls it off. And it's at home for Washington, I believe, which USC has been terrible playing away games this season, and they just have not looked – they have not looked like the team they just were last season.
Well, and you look at the spread. The spread opened up as USC was a 2-point favorite. It's now gone down to 1.5 points. It is a practical pick 'em. It's going to be – that's an interesting matchup, and – I tell you what, whoever loses that game has a true shot of missing out on a bowl this year, which would be extremely disappointing for either one of those schools. Why don't you take us into our next segment, man?
Absolutely. Moving right along, I mean, we got through all our games and kind of covered through, all the matches. There's a lot of matchups this weekend. Moving on, our next segment, there are a couple of undefeated teams left. There's not a lot left over now. There were quite a few even last episode when we recorded, but there are a few undefeated teams left. And within that, obviously not every team is going to finish undefeated. The question is, who within the undefeated teams will end up finishing undefeated? And will they get a playoff berth with that as well? First of all, we've got a team like Penn State. I don't think Penn State finishes undefeated. I think Penn State's going to have an upset in their final few games. They're going to have I believe they play Minnesota, and I think Minnesota is going to pull off an upset. I think we're going to have a sleeper game for Penn State where they pull off, where there's an upset that ensues and they don't get that undefeated berth. I think Iowa State does complete it. Now, Iowa State does not have the easiest remaining schedule post Texas Tech, but Texas Tech is definitely their hardest remaining opponent, I would say. And so once they get past them, I think they definitely can win out. Oregon is that team, in my personal opinion. I think Oregon's going to finish undefeated. Now, I did say Texas was going to, and we know what happened, so maybe I'm cursing these teams and they're all going to lose now, but it's okay if they do. I'm not too big of a fan of any of them, so it's all right if I'm cursing them. But Oregon, I think, is going to finish undefeated. Army, I think, finishes undefeated, but Navy is that one game that I can see them maybe dropping. But I definitely think Army finishes undefeated. And then my final team I see finishing undefeated, I think BYU. Of all the teams on this list, BYU has the easiest schedule remaining. I think BYU probably has the best chance of finishing undefeated, but it's college football. There's parity. There's parity in all college sports. I feel like it's not just basketball. It's just there's parity in all college sports because of just how the setup is and how everything is in college sports. So with that, I definitely think there could be parity, but I don't think that finishes BYU's season with a loss. I think BYU still, even in a game with a little bit of parity, can pull off an undefeated season. So I definitely think, and within these teams, Iowa State definitely making the playoffs. Oregon definitely making the playoffs. BYU, I think, is definitely making the playoffs. The one team I think that might be right on the outside looking in is Army. I think Army could be an 11 or 12 seed, but I think they will more than likely be a 13 or 14, even with an undefeated berth, depending on other teams. What are your thoughts on it? Well, who do you think finished undefeated, and which of these teams are going to go postseason?
I've got Oregon. Oregon's the easy one in the Big Ten. I think they're going to finish undefeated. Penn State, I think, possibly loses this weekend. And
Yes.
I think that obviously takes them out of the undefeated club and possibly Big Ten championship club. You've got, I don't feel good about Miami. I think Miami will find a way to pick up a loss here sometime. I think BYU has potential to finish undefeated. I think Indiana picks up a loss. I think Iowa State picks up a loss or two. And then Pitt, maybe. I could see Pitt finishing undefeated. I think Army loses to Navy in December. So that would take them out. So as far as teams getting into the playoff, I like Oregon. Obviously, I think they're going to be the number one overall seed. I think Penn State could sneak in there. I think Miami, even with a loss, could sneak in there. I think BYU, obviously, if they finish undefeated, they would be in there. Iowa State, if they have two losses, I think they're out, but they get into a pretty good bowl game. Indiana, they can't have more than one loss, in my honest opinion, if they want to find a way to get into the playoff. Pittsburgh would probably need to only have one loss if they want to get into the playoff. And then Army very well could be on the outside looking in the playoff because you got Boise State. If they continue playing as good a football as they are, Boise State's going to get the group of 5 bid. So I think it's going to be a pretty competitive final month. It's going to be fun as hell to watch, all the races for the conference and stuff like that come together because, hey, next week we get our first playoff ranking. So we're going to see our first where teams rank in the playoff. So that should be pretty fun. I think that's on Tuesday, which is unfortunately election night. But I'll be paying attention to the college football playoff rankings, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah, no, me too. That's not a bad thing to be. I didn't know that was the first one being released. That's exciting. So interesting day, interesting matchup. But hey,
yeah,
In the next episode, we'll definitely have to talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. By the time we record our next episode, either next Friday or Saturday, the new rankings will be out. So we shall see. It'll definitely be an entertaining month. Let's move on to our Husker segment. And we'll talk a little bit on Nebraska, what we think that they can do against US or UCLA, what they can do against the remainder of their schedule. As we all know, Nebraska played at Columbus against Ohio State last week. Nobody really gave them much, of a chance going into that game. Well, apparently our special teams is fixed because, John Hull goes in and makes a 54-yard field goal, makes 2 other field goals, and they were good with room to spare. And then our offense did just enough. Our defense was phenomenal against the athletes that Ohio State has, kind of held them at bay, only allowed 21 points against a team that, scores damn near 40 points a game. I'm happy with that performance, especially after Indiana. I went into the game last week where it's like, can we get the game or can we get a team, that comes out like they did against Colorado, where they're going to make it a ball game. They're going to try and punch it down your throat. And they did that against Ohio State. And from what I've been hearing, from the pressers and stuff like that, from coaches, they've come out with that mindset this week at practice, which I think bodes very well for their game tomorrow afternoon, because I think they're going to come in with that same mentality. I don't think they're going to overlook another team on their schedule. I think they're just going to come out and play football, which they need to do. They can't worry about what the name is on the front of the jersey. They need to worry about going out and executing at the highest level possible. And aside from a few plays, they did just that against Ohio State. They looked like they belonged on the field against a top 5 team. Nebraska's got almost as much talent as some of the other top half schools in the Big Ten. They shouldn't get blown out against teams like Indiana. But according to rule, they looked at the name on the jersey and they kind of overlooked them. And that's obviously not a great thing to do. Well, they entered November at 5-3. Guess what? Last year, they entered 5-3. I am enjoying this 5-3 a little bit better than last year. Last year's 5-3 is way different. I think Nebraska's offense is a little bit more open. I think they can throw the ball better. They need to get the run game going a little bit, which they did against Ohio State. But if they can get a little bit of balance, I think this offense is a little bit more wide open. I think they can score more points. Nebraska's defense, I think, is maybe around the same level as they were last year. So, yeah, if they can come out with the same mentality, I think they take care of UCLA this week. I think they beat USC. I think they come back home and beat Wisconsin at home. And that game against Iowa at Kinnick Stadium at 6:30 on Black Friday is going to be very interesting. Because if Nebraska is rolling in on 3 straight wins, that's a game where Nebraska can win and go 9-3 and they're a top 20 team. Hell, they're probably going to be a top 20 to 25 team going into that game if Nebraska is 3-0 the next 3 weeks. But it all just depends on what Nebraska team we get to show up, because they have as much talent to compete with anybody. It's just one coaching making boneheaded calls. You can't call screenplays that go negative yards 90% of the time. You need to start attacking downfield, which hopefully, if what I'm hearing is true, that Satterfield is not calling the offense tomorrow, I hope Nebraska comes out and opens it up. They need to start playing with the mentality to win instead of not to lose, because I think that's held the offense back. I really do. if they can come out free and easy and say blow out UCLA, I really feel good with the remainder 3 games. What are your thoughts on Nebraska thus far? Do you think if Nebraska comes out the way they played against Ohio State the rest of the year, do you think they can go 3-1 to 4-0? Do you think they'll finish 2-2? What are your thoughts?
I do think they'll finish 3-1. I think we already talked UCLA, and I think they'll come out maybe a little slow to start or just find their pacing, but then pick up a win by, like, I think I said 28-17 in that realm. Maybe even 35-17, potentially even a different score. But going into UCLA, it's at home for UCLA, but UCLA is not that team. Now, there is such a thing as at-home advantage always in sports, especially college football, but they're just not that team. I do think that Nebraska can pick up momentum with a win over UCLA and then another win over USC. Wisconsin is where I think we will come into a really hard-fought, either close win or close loss. That's my thought with both Iowa and Wisconsin. I do think we win one of them, but I think the other one is going to be a close loss. I don't see us getting blown out by Wisconsin or Iowa. I think it'll be a 3 to 7 point loss or a 3 to 7 point win. Now, I also think we could beat Iowa by 2 scores. Without a doubt, I think we could go to Iowa and win by 2 scores, but I think Wisconsin is going to be a 3 to 7 point game no matter who wins or loses. So I think it's going to be an exciting matchup. We're pretty evenly matched with Iowa and Wisconsin, honestly, not just because our records look very similar, also just because we are very similar teams. Skill matchup, I do think we have the advantage in several areas, but you said it best. Which Husker team is going to show up? That's going to determine every single game, not just those harder. Even the UCLA game, it's going to determine that game. So, and the USC game, which are the lower tier matchups we have remaining, and the 2 games that we should be able to win by 2 scores. Yeah. Whether that's 10 or 14 points, we should be able to win by 2 scores against USC and UCLA. I think Wisconsin is a 3 to 7 point win or loss, and then I think Iowa could be a 2-score game on either side, honestly. So I think we'll finish the season 3-1. Obviously, get a bowl game, get a pretty decent bowl game, and break back into. I mean, I think we would have to beat Wisconsin to break back into the top 25, 100%. But I think there's a chance, if we beat UCLA and then beat USC in back-to-back games, that we could possibly get closer, and then that we'd have to get that win against Wisconsin more than likely. But I definitely think we could finish in the realm of top 25 or just in the top 30, because that does exist. Obviously, it's not the same ranking, but there is a top 30, and I think we can get our name up in that and have a good bowl game and get a really good push for next season too. I think we'll look towards the next year and have some success in that realm as well, and just continue this growth, because there's a lot of players that I think can grow a lot from now until next year. So I'm excited. I think we finish with a bowl game and finish with 8 to 9 wins.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think we get to a bowl game, and I think we win that bowl game.
Absolutely.
To have way more momentum going into next year. The big question is, yes or no, Satterfield is still calling plays next year?
No, 100%. If what you said is true, if he's really not calling plays this weekend, I would say that's probably pretty telling for his future with the team. But I could be 100% wrong, but I think he's gone.
I agree.
Even if they go on a run, because if they beat UCLA and he's not calling plays, that's going to be kind of telling as to what they might need to do going forward.
Well, if they beat UCLA handily, which I think Nebraska can score 30-plus points a game if they really want to, if they aren't so conservative on play calls, that's the big thing. You can't be conservative. You need to attack. Like, I get it. It's one thing, like, if you're up by 20 to 30 points, you can be conservative at the end of the game. Who cares? But if you're trying to play a 4-quarter game, you need to attack. And this team hasn't done a whole lot of attacking, and they score 17 to 24 points. It seems like 24 to 28 points is their cap. It's like you've got athletes that can score in the mid-30s a game. So I agree. I don't think he's going to be here next year. And I'm also going to say, like, even if the special teams goes on this little run where they're doing pretty well, I don't think our special teams coordinator is going to be there either. I think he's going to be changed out too. Maybe even our running back coach is gone. Who knows? And maybe more changes.
Clean house a bit.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to wait and see how things transpire. But again, it's like if we get, the team that shows up, at Ohio State, if they play at that level where they're competing, they're going to win most of these games. They would probably win most of their games on their schedule that they have this year. They would have beaten Illinois at home for the 400 sellout. They would have had a closer game against Indiana had they not overlooked the name on the jersey. They wouldn't have lost as bad to Indiana had they had a better game plan and not underestimated what Indiana can do. Because Indiana, to that point in the season, put a lot on film that Nebraska should have accounted for, and they did not. They did not account for it. That's why they lost 56-7, and they had no answer. As soon as Nebraska got punched in the mouth, it was like, oh, it's this again, and it just kept snowballing. Last week, I think, is more indicative of the team that we have, though. They show that they can compete on the national stage against a top 5 opponent. Go out and take care of business in the next 4 games. It's what they need to do. If they don't do that, well, we could be having more conversations about what next year has at stake. But I'm overall relatively pleased with this year's, 5-3 start compared to last year's for sure. But yeah, as the season goes on, we'll keep everybody, posted, especially to all of our Nebraska fans that listen. Anything that pops up as far as, maybe assistant coach firings or roster movement or even recruits, keep everybody posted on here. We're going to move on to our last segment, and that is our top 5 teams to not win a national championship. Why don't you kick us off with your list, man?
Absolutely. So this was a tough list to make. There's a lot of teams that could go on this list, but I narrowed it down. My number 5, 2008 Texas. That team was led by obviously star college quarterback Colt McCoy and a pretty dangerous Texas defense as well. But this Texas team was impressive. They were extremely dangerous and obviously went on a tear and had an extremely successful regular season and a pretty successful season beyond that as well. So my number 5 has to be Texas, 2008 Texas.
Nice. That was your number 5, you said?
Yeah.
My number 5 is 2008 Texas as well. That team with Colt McCoy, they were as dangerous as anybody, and their defense was stacked as well. So yeah, I think that was a pretty easy put in there. What's your number 4?
Coming at number 4, I had the 2018 Alabama. They were 14-1, led by Tua. Obviously, they had a lot of success during the regular season, going undefeated, and then they have injuries eventually derailed them. Tua has been getting injuries and been going down since college, since high school, actually. And so this was no exception. And a super successful, almost championship season ended up in injuries and Tua going. So, but this was a really good team, and this was a high-powered, sometimes forgotten Alabama team. So got to give it to the 2018 Alabama for my number 4.
I got 2016 Alabama led by Jalen Hurts. That was a team that they beat Washington, whooped up on Washington in the Peach Bowl 26-7, and then they played Clemson in the national championship, and Jalen Hurts couldn't do anything. That was a really good Clemson team too. But yeah, that was my number 4. What's your number 3?
Coming in at number 3, I had the 2019 Ohio State Buckeyes, boasting an offensive powerhouse with J.K. Dobbins and Justin Fields. They had a perfect regular season and just looked extremely dangerous. One of the better Ohio State teams of the last few seasons, obviously based on the theme, not one of the ones that won a championship, but one of the more underrated and one of the better teams when we think about Ohio State.
My number 3 is the 2005 USC Trojans.
Ooh, yeah.
They were led by quarterback Matt Leinart. They had Reggie Bush and Lindell White in the backfield. The receivers, Dwayne Jarrett and Steve Smith. That offense averaged 50 points per game in the regular season. Looked like Pete Carroll's best team yet. But then they played a Vince Young-led Texas Longhorn team. And they got Vince Young at the end of that game. Vince Young ran into the end zone to give Texas the win. Quite possibly the best USC team to not win a national championship for sure. What's your number 2?
Coming in at number 2, I have the 2016 Alabama team. I mean, you already talked about them. Jalen Hurts, obviously, star talent, but they did fizzle out in that championship game. And I think this is one of Saban's better teams, even though it didn't win a championship, one of his best regular season. And to that point, obviously they had success postseason, but that they just could not beat Clemson. That was a stacked Clemson team. So that's got to be my number 2.
That's a pretty good pick. I've got 2011 LSU in at number 2. Arguably one of the better LSU teams. You had Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, in the defensive backfield. You had Morris Claiborne in that defensive backfield as well. They were a very good team. They beat these teams, number 17 West Virginia, number 19 Georgia, by a combined score of 89-31. They beat Florida, Auburn, Mississippi State. Those teams all finished with 7+ wins, and they outscored them 105-27. They were one of the more electric LSU teams that Les Miles has ever had. So yeah, that they would be my number 2 for sure. What's your number 1?
It's a great number 2. Coming at number 1, I had the 1983 Nebraska Cornhuskers. Obviously, one of the best teams that Osborne had. Obviously, one that did not win the championship. So it's got to be my number 1.
Yeah, the 1983 Nebraska is my number 1 as well. You look at it. If Tom Osborne hadn't gone for 2 against Miami in that national championship, Nebraska probably would have won the national championship in 1983. Nebraska was really close to national titles in 78, 79, 80, and 82, as well as 83. So you're talking about an almost dynasty between those 5 years right there. They whooped up on number 4 Penn State in the kickoff classic to start the year. They never let off the throttle. They beat Minnesota 84-13. They beat Syracuse 60-7. Colorado 69-19. Iowa State 72-29. Kansas 67-13. Oh, by the way, Mike Rozier won the Heisman that year. He was the best running back by far with over 2,100 rushing yards. Turner Gill, who was their quarterback, finished fourth in Heisman voting. That team averaged well over 50 points a game. And they fell down 31-17 in the national championship that year. Nebraska pulled within one, and Tom Osborne decided to go for the 2-point conversion to win rather than going for the tie and going to overtime. That didn't work out. But, man, I would have loved to have been alive during that season because that would have been one of the more electric Husker football teams that we've had.
Oh, my gosh, without a doubt. That was probably the most electric one. It's just we didn't cap it off with a title.
Right, exactly. Now, what are your 3 honorable mentions?
Well, you named LSU, 2011 LSU. I had them on mine. I also had that USC squad because that USC squad was insane. And then I had the 1994 Penn State as well on my team. On my list. I thought they are maybe an underrated mention on this list, but those are my 3 honorable mentions because LSU, I mean, as you mentioned, they were scary. That's when LSU was LSU. That's when they were that insane, high-powered team. And then, I mean, same with USC. That was one of Carroll's best teams he had, and they didn't win a title. But like you said, the amount of points they were scoring a game was just unheard of. It was video game numbers. So those two you got to give credit, and then that 94 Penn State as well.
Yeah. My honorable mentions are the 2019 Ohio State, 1971 Oklahoma, and 1986 Miami.
Perfect. Man, that Miami team was different.
Yeah, was very different. Now Miami's trying to get back to that level. We shall see if they keep it up. Do you have anything else to add before we close out?
Well, I do want to let everyone know, remember, you can always, whether it's during our live or if you watch our show, I know some people watch us when we're not on live, you can always give us any ideas you want for top 5s or any segments. It does not have to just be top 5s. Obviously, there's so many different options for top 5s. So if there are any viewers that have any ideas or want to see us talk about anything or do any top 5s, you can always drop us a comment, whether we're live or not live. Just drop us a comment down in our comments.
100%. We will read all those comments, and we will fit whatever suggestions you guys have wherever we can in our episode. So don't be afraid to get a hold of us. But as always, we appreciate you guys for watching, commenting, and again, enjoy this college football weekend. We only got 4 of these college football weekends left until bowl season starts and playoff season starts. So let's go. It's all on from here.
It is. We'll be with you guys every step of the way, bringing you guys all the football news and anything that happens. And it's only going to get more exciting from here. So stay tuned, everybody. It's going to be a great rest of the season and a great few shows we got left over for you guys.
Absolutely. As always, we will talk to you guys next week.